The Philadelphia 76ers have been pretty damn good this season, and they just added James Harden to the roster. This team could be pretty scary. Real quick before I dive into this topic, if you are new here and you are not subscribed and you enjoy this video, then please do me a favor and subscribe for weekly NBA content. Also drop a like on this video, only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in terms of how the video performs in the algorithm. With that out of the way, let's talk about the Sixers. There are a million questions to ask about this team, as there is with any team that makes an addition of the likes of James Harden. However, the one I want to focus on is, where does this team stand amongst the league's top contenders? I think we should all agree that the Sixers cemented themselves in the category of contender the moment that they made this move. Unless you're one of those 5 weirdos who has been saying that the loss of the contributions of Seth Curry and Andre Drummond essentially cancels out the addition of Harden. Unless you're one of them, we should be on the same page. However, where they rank among the long list of contenders is a different conversation. I've made a video on this before, but the NBA is as wide open as it has ever been, and not just in a sense that there's more than 2 teams that could win. No, I mean like there are genuinely like 12 teams I could see winning it all if things went their way. That list has actually expanded since I made the video on the subject, because now the Celtics, the Nuggets getting healthy, and the Grizzlies, and then obviously the Sixers are now in this conversation when I didn't previously consider them a part of it. A video on the resurgence of the Celtics will be out later this week, by the way, so keep an eye out for that. But where in this pool of talent do the 76ers fit in? Well, let's actually take a dive into this roster post-trade. James Harden brings a dimension to the Philadelphia 76ers that they have needed pretty much since the moment Joel Embiid came onto the scene. A shot-creating guard who could space the floor and make plays for his teammates. That was always the perfect player to pair with someone like Joel Embiid. The Sixers made 2 different attempts at this type of player in the past before, those 2 being Markelle Fultz and Jimmy Butler. Jimmy didn't quite work out with how awkward his fit was with Ben Simmons because both of them could not shoot threes. And Markelle Fultz did not work out because we still don't know. Either way, the type of player who best complements Joel Embiid has been kind of well known for a while now, and that type of player is finally here in the form of James Harden. However, I do have some doubts with these 2 as a duo, as well as James Harden as an individual. While the best type of player to pair with Joel was fairly obvious, like I said, it's not as though there was ever one archetype of star player who would just fit seamlessly with him. What I mean by this is that Joel is a little bit different, because as a big man, you're typically expected to be the best position at playing off of other positions. However, because of Embiid's uniqueness, even as a big, he doesn't fit into the archetype of a player built for a traditional guard-big 2-man game. Obviously, the primary idea of a 2-man game with these 2 positions is a pick and roll. It's the #1 play in basketball for a reason. However, as good as Embiid might be as a screener, that does not mean he's necessarily an amazing pick and roll player. When in an on-ball screen scenario, Embiid generally likes to do 2 things. He pops out for the jumper, or he uses the movement of the screen and the players moving around to reposition himself. Positioning is a huge part of Joel Embiid's game, and one of the many ways the Sixers like to get him to his spots is by running screen action, where he then moves himself somewhere else on the floor and gets that positioning. And this play style is really effective in terms of how it best utilizes Joel Embiid, but it's not so effective in a 2-man game type of situation. Joel is not one to dive to the rim off of a pick and roll or catch an alley-oop. He's not really going to be waiting in the dunker spot all that often. He is a more tactile, slow-paced player who likes to pick his spots, and that's where he's comfortable. So because of that, where James Harden plays into that becomes interesting. Now, this is not to say that an Embiid and Harden pick and roll will not be an effective play, because at a certain point with that much talent, you will figure it out. However, it's not going to be be the picturesque pick and roll many might expect. To give them some credit, Kobe and Shaq were not necessarily running pick and rolls all day because of Shaq's ability to post ups, and that duo still worked off of each other plenty fine, other than off the court stuff, but you know what I mean. But outside of that, I'm concerned about what both of these players are going to do when the other is isolating. When Embiid is in the low block, is Harden going to stand 5 feet behind the three-point line and wait to get the ball back? Or will he spot up or cut or do literally anything besides just turn into a glitched NPC that can't move? Harden used to be a pretty damn effective off-ball player in his earlier years in Houston and back when he was in OKC, but that aspect of his game kind of got stamped out by Morey ball, and I was hoping it would return with the Nets, but it really didn't, so I don't have a lot of hope that that's going to happen with the Sixers either. And even with Embiid, back when he was playing with a shot creator like Jimmy Butler, he was not always the most adept at finding ways to affect the game without having the ball. But in general, I'd say he's much better off here than Harden. He's good enough at getting positioning, and he will fight for rebounds, so I really only have minor concerns for him and much larger ones for James. Now, how good James Harden actually is at this point is a cause for concern. However, I do believe it's a concern that's been blown out of proportion. James has dealt with the ramifications of his hamstring injury that he suffered in the second round versus the Milwaukee Bucks. It affected the work that he was able to do in the offseason, and it has affected his play during the regular season this year. A lot of people like to point to weight as Harden's issue, but we have seen Harden be out of shape and still average 35, so I wouldn't put too much stock into that idea. But outside of physical issues, I truly think it came down to how he was playing and being utilized in Brooklyn. There are two main factors here that I think were intertwined in a way. One, Harden had to share the ball with other big-time perimeter scorers, and that perimeter distinction is much more important than I think you might expect. And two, Harden was expected to be more of a playmaker as a result of that. And I really feel as though those circumstances kind of mess with Harden's head and thus resulted in a fluctuation in how actually aggressive he was. And it's the main reason why he wouldn't quite fill the box score like we know him to do. And I actually looked at the numbers to support this theory, and while it is not the biggest sample size in the world, the numbers do back me up. I looked at every single box score from Harden's 44 games with the Brooklyn Nets this year. Every single one. Subscribe, damn it. In the 7 games where neither Kyrie nor Kevin Durant played with James, Harden averaged 32 points, 9 rebounds, and 11 assists on 59% true shooting. Compare that to the 37 that he played with either Kevin Durant or Kyrie. With them, he averages 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists on 57% true shooting. That's 11 more points on mildly better efficiency, and love it or hate it, one big factor in the higher production is James averaged 5 more free throws per game without them. So as a lone perimeter star once again, even with lingering injury issues, Harden averaged a 30-point triple-double on better than average efficiency. His 3-point percentage and field goal percentages leave a lot of room to be desired, to be sure, but I promise you, if Harden was producing like he had in those 7 games without those two, you wouldn't hear nearly as many people claiming him to be washed. But what difference does that make if he's still going to play with Joel Embiid? He still has to share shots, right? Well, not really, because shots isn't necessarily the problem so much as it is time of possession. This is where Joel Embiid and the fact that he is a big man is going to play the most in Philadelphia's favor. The way centers operate, or at least those in Embiid's archetype, has little to do with ball handling and holding the ball for large percentages of the possession. Time of possession is a huge difference between a perimeter player and a big. With Embiid, more often than not, he gets the ball after getting his positioning, after someone else was dribbling the ball for him, a play of some kind after that positioning has been had and after he has caught the ball is usually going to happen within 5 seconds of the catch, usually even 3 or less. Quick decision making on the catch is a huge part of Embiid's game. He is going to make a pass after recognizing help. He's going to attack and either shoot or pass after the defense adjusts. He's going to pass it back out to reposition. Whatever it is, Embiid's making decisions quickly and he's not dribbling the air out of the ball. Embiid, even with high usage, does not have the ball in his hands for 20 seconds at a time, unlike someone like Kyrie or KD, especially Kyrie. While Embiid might take as many shots as Kyrie or Kevin Durant would, it's within a different offensive role with different requirements from him in terms of time with the ball and decision making. So in that situation, there is a lot less stepping on each other's toes and a lot more just free-flowing offense. 3 high-volume ball handlers on the same team reaches a point of redundance, and that's going to result in one of these players dipping off, and in this case, it was James Harden. But if you have a star player who is going to score without dribbling the air out of the ball, that is going to be substantially different next to that ball handling player. For example, Klay Thompson with the Kevin Durant Warriors. His scoring worked in ways that would not interrupt what KD or Steph did. Similar thing goes for Joel Embiid. His scoring, the way he operates, it doesn't interrupt Harden, or at the very least, it doesn't interrupt him to nearly the degree of the likes of Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving. And that's not an indictment on those two players, by the way. It's just clashing play styles, and Harden got the worst of it. That's just poor roster construction. So you factor that in and then also give Harden an offseason to recover, and I think we'll see him fully back to what he was next year. Anyways, that was a long-winded way of me saying that I don't think James Harden is that bad, and I think he's going to be a lot better in Philadelphia than he was in Brooklyn. Last but not least, let's talk about this team outside of their 2 star players. This is where my confidence with the team starts to get a little bit shaky because the roster construction is not amazing after these 2. The actual talent isn't necessarily a problem, it just doesn't fit amazingly well. Tobias Harris is the type of third guy you like around a Ben Simmons-Joel Embiid duo, not so much a Joel Embiid-Harden duo. The reason I say that is Tobias functions as the yin to Ben's yang. Ben was a dominant force on the break and the full court, but in the half court set, you needed someone who had a little bit more offensive polish that could create for himself. That need really is not there with James Harden anymore, and a Tobias Harris possession is just going to end up being a possession that could have been a James Harden possession. Really, the only bummer of this move that I thought of immediately for Philadelphia is how this is going to affect Tyrese Maxey's development. Tyrese is a solid enough catch and shoot guy. His percentages are good, but his volume is pretty low, and Harden can't be the only ball handler all the time, but Maxey functions best as a slasher on the ball, and I don't know how much opportunity he's going to get that now that he's playing alongside James Harden in the backcourt. Really, more ideally, you would just have a 3-and-D guard next to Harden. Instead, you have Maxey kind of playing outside of his role. I think he'll still be serviceable enough, but with Harden, you are limiting his maximum capable impact. Something you are willing to do because it's James fucking Harden, but it's a little bit sad, especially if you're like me and you're a big fan of Tyrese Maxey. Matisse Thybulle is one of the most overrated players in basketball. While I get he is a great defender, he is a 0 on the offensive end, save for a well-timed cut here or there. He is an alright 25 minutes per game player, but it completely perplexes me while Philadelphia fans treat Australian Andre Roberson as though he is some untouchable asset. Outside of that, everyone else fits fine enough, but the rest is not a particularly talented group. Georges Niang and Furkan Korkmaz can shoot. Danny Green is a great defender who can shoot until he can't. Paul Millsap is serviceable. Paul Reed has been serviceable, filling the Drummond vacancy. But overall, this supporting group leaves a lot of room to be desired, and this brings us to my overall evaluation of the Sixers. While I am hopeful that Harden and Embiid will work well together, and at least this season Harden will be 85% of what we've known him to be, the surrounding core I just don't think is really good enough. Now, I would otherwise justify this with I didn't think the core around LeBron and AD was particularly great, but they still won win a championship. However, there are two big factors here. The NBA's competition is as good and deep as ever, and I'd argue better than what the Lakers had to face. And then second, the Sixers have 24 games to figure everything out with this team in terms of their chemistry. And historically, mid-season trades for star-level players tend to not work until the following season, after there's been an extended time with the team and a training camp. So my prediction for the Sixers is they show a lot of upside and they are a genuine contender, but it is the 2022-23 season where they actually do their real damage. As of right now, I would take the Suns, Warriors, Bucks, and Nets ahead of this Philadelphia team, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Chicago or Miami even ended up knocking them off. But come next season, I would not be surprised at all if this ended up being my championship favorite, but we're going to have to wait and see on that one. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.